Welcome back to another episode of the Football Frenemies podcast. Wolverine and his nutty friend are going to discuss college football around the country from the perspective of the greatest rivalry in all of sports. You guys are going to have to excuse me. I am battling a cold, so you're going to hear my nasally gross voice today. Hopefully Cody can do some carrying as he did on the last podcast. Today we're going to talk about the Pac-12. One of our goals in this podcast in the offseason is to spend some time talking about every Power 5 conference. And we had to talk about Cody's favorite Power 5 conference with our first conference look ahead. So we're going to talk about the Pac-12. Cody has an insane theory that the Pac-12 is the best Power 5 conference next year. I'm going to try not to roll my eyes too much and set him straight. We're also going to take some time to just get some things off our chest. Yes, it's the off season, but there are still some things that are eating at us, that are bugging us, that we just got to rapidly talk about. It's going to be the first edition of our rapid rant. We'll try to get in, out quick, and we'll feel better afterwards. Lastly, we're going to rant about our rivals. Last time we didn't talk much trash about the rivalry, and I just got to say a couple of things that are mean about Ohio State. Cody's probably going to do the same thing about Michigan. And it's harder for him because his team has lost the last two to find a negative about Michigan, but I'm sure he's got some things loaded in the chamber. So with all that said, we'll get into it. Cody, how you doing tonight?
Dude, I am beaming right now. It is March 1st. We had mid-60s here in central Ohio. Like, you walked outside. Yeah, you walked outside today in the afternoon, and it felt like it was May. Like, it was amazing. I can't remember the last time that we started off March this way, because normally what happens in late February, kind of like recently, you get some weather that teases spring's coming early, you should get excited, and then March 1st, snowstorm, schools are canceled, no one's driving to work, and everyone just gets depressed again. But this year was different. March 1st started off with a banger, and it was pretty nice. Like, earlier for dinner, I made my dinner and just went and lit my campfire in the backyard and just ate dinner fireside. Just That's because beautiful. Why not? You know, I'm always down for a chance to do that. So that is good. Spring football is – most programs are around the corner. Some might have started. Did Michigan just start? I know they're starting this week or next week, but maybe they already started. You'd have to let me know on that one.
They started last week.
Okay.
And they're actually off this week for break, and then they'll be back after their spring break or whatever. And then they're going to have their spring game, I believe April 1st, which is the very first spring game of all the Big Ten schools. So they're going to get that out of the way. Some schools are going to wait till the end of April. So we'll have our first look in about a month at the 2023 team.
Do we want to talk about the fact that I just got an update that Ohio State basketball has won 2 games in a row now?
Oh,
they just beat Maryland.
That's a big win. I mean,
any win right now is a big win.
But Maryland is right up there at the top of the conference, so that's a big win for Holtman. Do you think he should be fired?
Yes. But if all of a sudden they just turn around in March and say they get to the semifinal of the Big Ten tournament somehow, which to me, I would not bet on it, but I don't think that's unrealistic, just given how unpredictable Big Ten basketball is. I think that is by far the toughest conference to just predict anything when it comes to basketball. But it doesn't sound like it. I mean, at one point he was 1-14. If he didn't get fired after that 15th game when we were 1-14, I don't think he's going to be gone after this season. But the big question is who are you going to hire? You know, Ohio State doesn't really have a breadwinner, up and comer, within their program who's an assistant that you're if Holtman were to go, this guy's going to take over, which this might sound like a stretch, but in football, if Ryan Day for some reason was gone, I think we're all ready to take a big gamble on Brian Hartline just because of the way he is as a recruiter and a developer, even though that's one position. But he's still someone who he's an upper-comer, right? We had to make him offensive coordinator this year because we were going to lose him. Brian Hartline is very well sought after. We don't have anyone even near like that in our basketball program. And who on earth is Ohio State going to go out there and get? Because even though we're not a bad program, we are not a blue blood in basketball. We just aren't. We're not even close. We had the year in 2006 with Mike Conley and Greg Oden and all of that. And then, Evan Turner gave us a couple moments. We had the Jaron Solinger, Aaron Kraft years, which still, we did have 1 year we got to a Final Four. But even with that, OSU basketball is really more often known for recruiting pretty good and then doing nothing with it besides the 2006 team that went to national championship and lost to Florida. The same year we lost to Florida in football. 2007 was rough.
That's kind of what Holtman seems to be in that hole where he's bringing in these freshmen like Sensabaugh or Branham last year that are really good, but they're only there for a year. And
or guys leave.
To win.
Yeah, and we got guys that leave. We had DJ Carton a couple years ago who was one of the better recruits in his class, and we couldn't even keep him. He transferred home and went back to Marquette. So, he's been recruiting decently. But the other thing, it's kind of the same thing with the transfer portal. Transfer portal, they've hit a few guys that were supposed to be good players. When we got Justice Suing from California, that was supposed to be a big deal, and he has really not done anything since he's been there, anything of note.
Well, on the coaching front, I think there's a coach over at Butler that knows a thing or two about winning basketball games at Ohio State. On the college football front, I think you'd be insane to hire Brian Hartline when Luke Fickell has the head coaching experience and the desire to coach at Ohio State.
Yes, if Ryan Day was gone, that's without a doubt the number one thing. But I was more just giving the example of there's a guy within the program to be excited about, at least if you were stuck in that kind of situation compared to for basketball, that doesn't exist. And speaking of Butler, that's where Holtman came from. We can't just keep taking Butler coaches over and over again.
Well, do you know who the current Butler head coach is?
No.
It's Thad Matta.
Oh, that's right. I totally forgot about that man. Talk about a guy who's probably the best coach we've ever had, and yet people just couldn't wait to get rid of him. He felt very comparable to Les Miles without winning a championship. Les Miles did great things at LSU, and they could not wait to get rid of him.
Well, and I think it's similar to Mark Richt at Georgia, where
that's a good comparison.
Keys to a battleship, and you're stuck in idle, and you're doing pretty good, but you're not really launching those missiles. So I understand it, but at the same time, I think Matta. There's a reason I think they've kind of dropped off since he was. I don't know if the word is let go or encouraged to leave or whatever that situation was. Let's talk some more football though. Cody, you have been consistent. I'll give you that. Consistently telling me that the Pac-12 may be the best conference in college football next year. And I'm just curious. I want to hear your reasons why. I'm going to try not to interrupt too much because I think you're crazy. And let's let the crazy speak, and let's see if you have some validity here. Why is the Pac-12 going to be so good next year? Why are you so excited?
The number one reason, there's multiple things you can come back to, and there's a few other things we'll add to. But for me, the number one reason, which we have learned this is extremely valuable in college football, is quarterback play. And not only are they by far bringing back the most production and overall talent and deepest quarterback rooms in the country, but they're doing that across teams that have winning records. They're coming back with already having had good success for a season, and they're going to have a second go around at it. First of all, this previous time when we did all these, those college football playoff, what would it look like under that EPL system? We just took the regular 1 through 16 rankings, and there were 6 teams from the Pac-12 in that top 16. There were not more teams in that top 16 and the top 25 with more teams than the Pac-12. They were just soaring above it. But the people that they're bringing back at quarterback, there's not really any other conference that prepares. And this is kind of the stat that I'm first going to talk about. Just first thing, just like I said, the teams in general returning. The Pac-12 has 5 teams returning in the conference where their quarterback is coming back and they had 10 wins last season.
Okay.
5 teams. USC, Utah, Oregon, Oregon State, and Washington. Now, there's an asterisk by one of them because Oregon State has DJ Uiagalelei coming back. But he was a previous full-time starter in which all the stats I'm going to go by, whether they're a transfer or not, like it's all about were they a previous full-time starter. And you could argue that Oregon State definitely upgraded from that because I guarantee you could not name me Oregon State's quarterback right now without looking it up.
Of last year? No way.
Exactly. Yet they went 10-3. So they have all that coming back. 10-5. The SEC has one team returning their starter who had 10 wins. Can you tell me?
That's 10 wins in the SEC. There's not.
With their QB coming back.
Oh.
Their starting quarterback.
LSU.
Yes, LSU, Jaden Daniels. Big Ten has one.
Or not.
LSU was 10-4.
Okay, I was like, I couldn't remember if they got to 9.
Now, the bowl win helped it out with that, but
there we go.
The Big Ten has one team bringing back their starting quarterback with 10 wins. Can you tell me?
The greatest university in the world.
Yes.
The University of Michigan.
Yes, the biggest scrub university in the world.
Oh, my gosh. Please. You wish.
Biggest scrub. But, yes, Michigan is the only team in that. In the ACC, there is Florida State, which I'm going to get to them later. There is Florida State. They're bringing back Jordan Travis after they went 10-3, and then in the Big 12, Kansas State I think is the only one bringing back Skylar Thompson.
Not
I think that's
Thompson.
no, it's not Skylar Thompson. No, yeah, Will
Howard.
Will Howard, yes, Skylar Thompson's proven. Yeah, Will Howard's come back. So all the other Power 5 conferences they have one. That's it. They have one. The Pac-12 is returning 5 quarterbacks that are coming back that the teams will have that are previous 10-win teams, and the quarterbacks were starter elsewhere. First of all, USC, Caleb Williams, returning Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, number 1 pick in the draft in the 2024 draft. That's coming up. Caleb Williams.
Yeah, we'll see.
Next one, Michael Penix coming back to Washington. He's going to be there. Bo Nix coming back to Oregon. Cam Rising coming back to Utah. And then, like I said, this is the one with the asterisk, DJ Uiagalelei coming back to Oregon State. He's coming back there. All right. But there's some other rising names in the conference that I think are worth mentioning because there's 2 quarterbacks that I guarantee you couldn't tell them, and I couldn't have told you this before. But there's Arizona quarterback Jaden DeLora. Have you heard of him? He was a sophomore last year. He threw for 3,685 yards and had 30 touchdowns.
That's awesome.
And then there was Washington State quarterback Cameron Ward, who was also a sophomore, threw for 3,231 yards and had 28 touchdowns.
Transfer from Incarnate Word, I believe.
Is he?
I think so.
I mean, it said he was on Washington State last year. Like this was their QB.
No, I meant like before.
Okay. Yeah, he might have transferred somewhere before, but yeah. So I mean, like I said, you've got those 5 quarterbacks. You've got those 2 that are in there. Stanford also returns their quarterback. He was only 50 yards shy of hitting 3,000. And at current Stanford, Tanner McKee is his name. He had 2,000
draft, I believe.
Tanner McKee is?
I'm almost positive.
All right. Well, he's not that big of a loss, but. Here's one to really consider that's going to shake things up. Shedeur Sanders at Colorado. And you got to think of some of the guys they're bringing in now. Like, that dude is ready. And don't forget, UCLA is about to unleash Dante Moore.
Possibly.
And
he could lose that job.
But I wouldn't be shocked if he got it, though.
I'm cheering for him, too.
I am, too. And then, now, I don't think this one is as big of a deal, but Emory Jones transferred to Arizona State.
Yeah, but he wouldn't play over DeLora.
Arizona State, not Arizona.
Arizona. Oh, okay.
They're going to be rivals.
Arizona State, they've got someone else, though, don't they?
I mean, that's where Jaden Daniels left, so.
No, I know. I meant, did their quarterback this year leave?
I mean, when I looked up Arizona State QB stats for 2022, like they already had Emory Jones just put on there. He only threw for a little over 1,500 yards. Yeah, I don't think Arizona State had another QB that threw for more than that last year.
I thought maybe they took another transfer. I know that they have that freshman that is going to come in. He was the NIL guy who committed from Florida.
Yeah, I think that kid's about to be a fraud.
I don't think it's going to work out, but
no.
He'll be there. But, yeah, I wouldn't put a lot of stock in Emory Jones.
Yeah. And it's a shame, too, because California lost Jack Plummer. For some reason, he entered the transfer portal. Well, I guess it kind of makes sense because he was at Purdue. He went to Cal for a year. He threw for over 3,000 yards while he was at Cal and had over 30 touchdowns. But he's going to Louisville. He's getting reunited with Jeff Brom. So I think Brom convinced him to be a part of his system and said, hey, let me help you get to the NFL again. So
that's probably a good move.
So yeah, Brom's going. So he's going there. But so like I said, I mean, there's only 3 teams, unless you were right about the Stanford one, because I don't really care about Stanford. I didn't look that deep into it. There's only 3 teams, potentially 4 out of 12 in the Pac-12 that are debuting new quarterbacks. That's it. 4 teams.
If we are going to say the Pac-12 has the best quarterbacks in the country next year, as a conference as a whole, I would agree with you. I think that depth-wise, they have the best by far. I think you're looking at probably 2. So Oregon's going to get upset if I don't include their quarterback, but I think Penix and Caleb Williams are your Heisman hopefuls that have a legit shot. And the other guys are all just solid to really good.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say to that is I am not going to say in college football quarterbacks equate to wins like they do in the NFL. Because we saw last year with Caleb Williams, he was the best quarterback in college football last year. And USC would just melt down all around him. I remember, here's what I'm saying. I honestly think we paid too much attention to the Pac-12 last year because every week I'm thinking to myself, oh man, Oregon, like they could be a scary playoff opponent if Michigan got matched up with them. Or USC, like this offense is so good. Do I want to play USC or do I want to play TCU? And then I watched this USC game against Utah, and that's half a team. And I watched USC play Tulane, and they can't even play four quarters. Having the best quarterback on your team doesn't mean that you're going to be a great team. Even though
I think the Tulane game,
I'm not going to fight you on that.
Yeah, I think the Tulane game has to be looked through a specific window because, I mean, look over since we got to these New Year's Six bowls. Anytime that lower team gets down, gets a non-Power 5 team gets in, they're always the team that is super motivated and has everything they want to get, and the Power 5 team just doesn't even care. I mean, if you look at the teams that have lost, I think it's I think the group of 5 has a winning record in the New Year's Six bowl games. I remember Western Michigan barely lost to Wisconsin. Cincinnati barely lost to Georgia on a last second field goal. I think those games are tough to look at because outside of that, USC just couldn't get past Utah. In the regular season, Utah went for 2 at home. They beat USC. And then in the Pac-12 championship, there was a clear difference in that game when Caleb Williams got banged up. There was a clear difference. And when you're talking about TCU, what does TCU do this past year without Max Duggan leading all these comebacks that gave them the even opportunity to get to the playoff?
I mean, Max Duggan didn't even win that job to start the year. The guy ahead of him got injured. So I think TCU as a team was very good. And Max Duggan was very good and helped elevate them, of course. But in the Pac-12, I'm looking at USC, and I'm comparing them to the other top-tier teams. Because who would you say is the best team in the Pac-12 next year?
That's a good one because I am very, very much on the Washington hype train.
Wow.
I'm on the Washington hype train really, really much. I think I would still go with USC.
Okay.
I think I would still say USC is number one. I think Caleb Williams, I think they keep bringing in good transfer. I think they keep bringing in good transfers each year. Lincoln Riley, I do think, is the best coach in the conference. They had a decent, pretty good recruiting class this year. I would expect USC to still be the best team. I think Washington is number two. I would put Oregon at number three, and then returning Pac-12 champion with quarterback Cam Rising. That's who I would put Utah at number four.
Okay.
And like I said, I would not the funny thing is, as a betting man, I think the only one I would bet on to make the college football playoff is USC. But I mean, based off what these teams are bringing back and what they did last year, would it shock you if Washington made the playoff at number four? Would you be surprised if Oregon made the playoff at number four? Would you be surprised if Utah made the playoff at number four? To me, the answer is no.
The 4 seed, I would be surprised I would be very surprised at Washington. And I'm very high on their offense because I think that between Penix and the wide receivers, because they have, I think, 2 of their leading wide receivers coming back next year, they're going to be probably the most fun to watch. But I watched quite a bit of Washington. I remember watching, I believe there's a UCLA game where they were just like USC. They couldn't stop anyone defensively. And even though we're in 2023, college football, you still have to have good defense. Really that was the whole thing with Michigan. Yes, there was the interceptions, but if our defense had a pulse against TCU, Michigan plays in the national championship. Ohio State against Michigan, if the defense gets some stops at the end of the game, they could have pulled that out. So the defense is why I would be shocked at Washington. And also I probably would be surprised at USC because I don't think the defense is going to get better that quickly. So that's why I would think their best shot for a playoff is probably Utah.
But maybe so. I think I would actually. I mean, if you're going to add in the defensive thing, Oregon is probably actually the smart bet.
Oregon up there too, but I just think Utah with.
But even with that,
Coach Whittingham.
Even with that, though, when you look at it, outside of Georgia, all these best defenses, they're still giving up yards and touchdowns. It's just these best defenses, they find a way to get stops at the right time, and they can make big turnovers. That's really what defense is. The best defense is no longer about, are you holding teams under 200 yards? The best defense at these points are just, who are the teams that are forcing field goals, getting fourth down stops, and also making plays, getting the right strip sack or an interception, that is a pick six, for TCU. TCU's defense, you could argue, played good against Michigan in today's college football, yet Michigan had 45 points in 500, 600 yards of offense or whatever it was. And yet you can argue that TCU's defense played good in that game because they made plays in key moments. That's all that good defenses really need to do nowadays in college football. Can you make key plays in key moments? You don't have to hold teams under 200 yards, under 20 points consistently. Only Georgia is going to do that. That's only Georgia's going to do it. And so to me, that's why this QB thing is such a big deal. And it's not just the fact they have good QBs. To me, there's the disparity in QBs, because just to help you put some numbers in perspective, so between those 9 players in the Pac-12 quarterbacks, guys that are returning starters, they amassed a total of 33,467 passing yards, and they accounted for 322 touchdowns. The SEC has 19,672 yards coming back with 169 touchdowns. The Big Ten has 16,758 coming back and 138. So if you look at terms in that returning production, the Pac-12 has more than double than what the Big Ten does. Now, there is a whole conversation, which I think we'll get into, about some of the new quarterbacks coming in.
That's the thing.
Whoever's at Ohio State, Drew Aller at Penn State. But in the Big Ten, who was considered on that list, whose stats I put in, who you could argue is actually the most prolific passer coming into the conference next year, and that's Tanner Mordecai at Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah.
And I included him because he is even though he's a transfer, he was a full-time starter the previous season. He had 3,500 yards and 35 touchdowns. That's the most of either in the Big Ten. There's no returning Big Ten QB that had more yards and more touchdowns last year than Tanner Mordecai. But here's the question. So arguably right now, I think the argue between him and J.J. McCarthy is very different because J.J. didn't have to go balls to the walls for Michigan to win like Tanner Mordecai did. But the top returning QB in the SEC, now, we were talking earlier, we're like 95% sure that he's going to be back next year, but is Will Rogers.
He will be back. I found it.
Yeah, Will Rogers at Mississippi State. Dude threw for 3,900 yards. But what has Mississippi State really done? Maybe in the right place Will Rogers could, but let's look at right now. We are looking through the lens of stats. All right, so let's look through the lens of stats and compare guys by that. If you were starting a college football team, let's say, so right now we'll always put 3 guys on the board, and you tell me who you're taking. So right now the 3 guys on the board are Tanner Mordecai, Will Rogers, and Caleb Williams. Who are you taking?
Wait, why would you pick them?
Because that's the returning leaders in their conference, stat-wise. I just told you we're looking at stats. That's why. Because
what about the ACC?
That's a conference that's irrelevant to me.
Because give me what's his name? Drake May. I'll take Drake May. I might take Drake May over Caleb Williams.
Drake May is fine, but that's just one QB, and that's all there is in the ACC. And I'm going to get to why Jordan Travis doesn't matter later. So
I think that you are way off on Jordan Travis.
We'll get to that later.
To that. But I have to choose the returning Heisman winner or 2 other guys that are pretty good. Of course, yes, I'll take
Caleb Williams. All right, so Caleb Williams is off the board. Will Rogers and Mordecai are still on there. So now let's insert the next guy from the Pac-12, Michael Penix. Who are you taking between those 3 guys now?
Yeah.
Okay, he's off the board. Let's now put another guy in, Bo Nix.
Oh, that's tough. Oh,
I think this is, my opinion, this is where the conversation now got tough. I'm still taking Bo Nix in today's college football.
I'm building a team from scratch. Will Rogers is a gadget because he plays in the air raid. So
he's a gadget, exactly, for a very specific system.
I'm probably going to just ignore him. Oh, man, that is so hard. I'll take Bo Nix. You take your lumps. He's going to be great some days. He's going to really frustrate you others.
Okay, other 2 are still on the board. Now let's enter Cam Rising.
I'll take Mordecai.
You would take for me, I think it's very close between Mordecai and Rising. I think just because Cam Rising, along with these good numbers, not great, good numbers, but he's a proven winner, like back-to-back Pac-12 champions. Like Cam Rising has that proven winning at a high level.
Rising has the know-how, the moxie.
Mm-hmm.
I think that his talent ceiling is quite a bit lower, and that's where I'm starting from scratch. I'm going to take the higher ceiling guy in Mordecai, but Rising is a really good quarterback, and that's actually a tough choice.
Yeah, but it's still a tough choice. Would it still be a tough choice? This is one that I've been excited for you to have this one. Let's just say for pity's sake, Rogers, Mordecai still on the list, and now you've added DJU to that list.
Well, I'm still taking Mordecai.
Yeah, I would take Mordecai over DJU.
I would take Rising over DJU. Easy.
Well, I did too. That's why I had Rising in before you dingus. But anyways, like I said, we had to get to the fifth. We had to get to the 5th QB before we got to the numbers. Now, like I said, I'm putting aside the JJ McCarthy thing because that's different. That's different. But still, I mean, but in the Big Ten, who else are you ignoring besides JJ? Like, that's it. That's the only one. And like I said, because we looked through that in a specific lens.
You have acknowledged it, kind of. The thing about college football is that new players burst onto the scene every single year. So these guys that we're talking about so positively, like last year, we thought Caleb Williams would be good. We didn't know he was going to be Heisman Trophy, possible first overall.
I don't know about that. Caleb Williams was like on everyone's preseason top 5 Heisman list. Like, even if he was still Oklahoma.
Because of the system, right? I think there's a
Yes.
difference between, okay, he's going to ball out because he's with Lincoln Riley, rather than
I think he still would have been top 5.
Riley.
He would have still been top 5 preseason Heisman, even if he stayed at Oklahoma without Lincoln Riley.
Did you think Drake May was going to be as crazy good as he was? Did you think that he was going to be better than who he replaced? The guy, I already forgot it. I can see
Sam Howell? Yes, because Sam Howell was not good.
You are so rough on these guys.
What did Sam Howell do? What did he accomplish? He went the year that they started off number 8 in the country, they went 6-6.
Oh, I agree with that. I'm saying statistically, at North Carolina, Sam Howell matched up with the best of them. I can't think of a North Carolina quarterback that before Sam Howell that was amazing. He kind of started the revolution of.
That's fine. You can tell me he paved the way. I'm good with that. But we knew coming in that Drake May was a big recruit. In Sam Howell's final year, throughout the season, there was a lot of people already talking for Drake May to have replaced Sam Howell. Those conversations were already starting to happen. So we knew Drake May was going to be now, did we know he was going to be a top 3, top 4 QB? No, I'm not going to say that. But we knew he was one of the next rising QBs in the country. That was already talked about.
Well, for some reason, you are insanely low on Jordan Travis. If you want to talk about it, you can. I don't know if I want you to, because
we'll get to that later. There's another port that we'll get to.
You're ignoring Jordan Travis. You're ignoring Sam Hartman, the all-time ACC.
Well, Sam Hartman's not in the ACC.
I know he's independent now. I'm saying his statistics in the ACC are on the all-time leaderboard, number 1. I'd
love to go against Syracuse and Boston College in those schools every single week.
You didn't mention Jaden Daniels.
We already did. Oh well, because Will Rogers was still ahead of him. So you hadn't taken Will Rogers yet, so I couldn't get to Jaden Daniels.
Will Rogers, he's a gadget. He's a good quarterback. I take Jaden Daniels over Will Rogers.
That's tough. I think I do agree with you. However, that is not just the easy thing. And LSU has still always had a wealth of riches at receivers. Butte and Neighbors was one of the best wide receiver tandems in the country. And Jaden Daniels in 14 games still couldn't even throw for 3,000 yards.
Yeah, but he was running like crazy.
Good. Now he's taking a bunch of hits. That's good to hear. Dude's going to...
doesn't really like their quarterback to run very much except for one game in their whole career, but in the SEC they don't mind taking a hit.
Dude, I don't know when that changed. We went from JT Barrett 3 yards in a cloud of dust to CJ Stroud, who apparently is like Paper Mario, that if he got hit he would just cease to exist. I don't know where that all of a sudden changed. Even Justin Fields, we were take off and run, and then to me, C.J. Stroud must have not been taught, because it's so funny. If you watched just C.J. Stroud's first moment at OSU when he has a 55-yard touchdown run against Michigan State, and then you watched the Georgia highlights, you would have said, oh, that dude ran for 1,500 yards in the last 2 seasons. And we're his total yardage might be in the negatives because of all the sack yardage he took and was never running. I legitimately do believe that Ryan Day was you can't run the ball, because one of the things that I'm almost actually a little worried about is maybe Ryan Day didn't believe too much what was behind.
Ooh, that's spicy.
I think it was a lot easier to run with Justin Fields and those other guys when you had. JT Barrett had Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow behind him in 2017. Yeah, JT, go ahead, take 40 rushes a game. That's not a big deal.
I don't want to gas up my rival, but you've got a top 100 recruit and then a former 5-star in McCord. So I think that they were probably decent. I think it has to do more with Stroud personally. That's just my thoughts on that. But I do like the doubt. You keep doubting over there. It fuels me. I just want to say this. On this quarterback conversation, I've already admitted, I agree. The Pac-12 is going to have, by and large, the best quarterback play and the most entertaining quarterback play. And it might be one of the more fun conferences to watch. I think it might be analogous to the Big 12 last year, where every game is going to be a barn burner, and they're going to be 45 to 48 You're going to be 38-42 type games. However, here's why I don't really care about returning production when it comes to quarterbacks. I personally believe that there are 4 teams next year that have a real shot at taking home the national championship. And 3 of those teams will be starting new quarterbacks next year. And the team that has a returning quarterback is not from the Pac-12. So I just don't care that much. Yes, it's going to be good for the conference. It's going to be fun to watch. I don't
But in that
mean that they're the best conference.
In that regard, though, you're only talking about max 2 teams from a conference. I'm talking top to bottom. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, the Pac-12, like, honestly, at the end of the day, their best team might be the 5th team in the country. That's very possible. I'm not going to discount that. But when you go top to bottom, the teams that'll probably have the most winning records, the conference that, once again, will likely have the most 10-win teams, just like they did last year. And with all this production returning, like, I think it will be the tough. Like, for me, like, the Pac-12 is by far the most difficult conference to predict their conference champion. And it's not because teams are lacking in talent or lacking in skill, or lacking in that. It's because they're going to be all these teams every single week that are just battling another good QB who you never know who you might take. Like I said, Washington State is going to be primed to get probably a couple upsets next year because they're returning a good QB themselves. And so the Pac-12, I think, is going to be the best and toughest top to bottom. It's not about the absolute top tier teams, like comparing, like the Pac-12 doesn't have 2 teams like Michigan and Ohio State. They don't. But I mean, if you were going to stack up the Pac-12 against the Big Ten and you put one, verse 1 through whatever, have them play each other and then just have Rutgers and Northwestern play in a meaningless game as 13 and 14. I mean, I think you're easily taking the Pac-12 in 8 of those matchups. I think it's not even comparable.
I that's where I disagree because I think that a conference like the Big Ten or the SEC is going to have a defensive edge. And when you have a defensive edge, you can set the tone for the game where what we saw in the Rose Bowl, where Penn State just bludgeoned Utah. And Utah was easily the best team in the Pac-12. They were the Pac-12 champs. And yes, I know that's like comparing towards the top to the top. But even in the middle, you look at teams that Penn State played, close games with. Some of these middle-tier Big Ten schools are going to, I think, compete favorably against the Pac-12. It would come down to matchups. It's hard without having a bracket or something, but it's a deep conference. I'm not going to dispute that. It's going to be entertaining, not close. If I had to rank it, just top to bottom, it's maybe 3rd, but I can't put it any higher than that.
I mean, for me right now, I'm going, like I said, it's tough. Like you can go all you want with speculation and projection. Like for me, this is looking off what we can actually talk about, like things that have actually happened. Like to me, that's why these numbers and these returners do matter, because where we're at right now and having that conversation, you do have to go by what exists, like what do you have going forward in the next season. So like for me, like I would never say like this means this team should be ranked here, this team should be ranked here. But top to bottom, I mean, it's nearly inarguable that the Pac-12 is the deepest returning conference we have at this moment right now in time. And I do believe that that's going to play out to also be because, like we said, they've got some quarterbacks coming in. Like we haven't even got to Dante Moore, who's going to be legit, who's going to be a big deal as these teams take off.
I think the Big 12 comparison I made might be the problem, where the Big 12 had a really good middle, and it was all kind of clumped together at the top, where you really didn't know who was going to – I mean, at one point, Oklahoma State looked like they were going to win the conference, and then Kansas State kind of surged in, and then all of a sudden TCU is like, oh, they're just not going to lose. And I think that's what we're going to see, where you're going to have a lot of teams battling out at the top, but do you truly believe any of those teams could win a national championship? I don't.
I do think USC could. Because when you have a QB that is just otherworldly, it's possible. I mean, look at Cam Newton, Auburn 2010. The rest of that Auburn team was pretty rubbish, but Cam Newton was just a freak. So to me, does that make all of a sudden the analogy for every Pac-12 team? No, not at all. But I mean, Caleb Williams is special.
As a Lions fan, though, I can tell you that Auburn team had a defender, Nick Fairley, who played defensive tackle, and literally just blew up the opposing offensive line the entire national championship.
That's good. That's fine. I just didn't realize we were bringing the NFL's worst franchise into the conversation to help us figure out who is going to be the better conference next year.
What I'm saying is, yes, Auburn was an outlier, just like that's a good example. But they had a defense that could have a spectacular performance and shut down an opposing offense. If USC has a guy that comes out of nowhere to just blow up an entire game plan of the offense, then yeah, they could. Corey Foreman. There's potential there. Year 4?
This was like year 2, if that. He's a young player.
Has it not been that long?
He's a young player. I think he was 2021 recruiting class.
All right. Well, maybe that's him. But short of a Corey Foreman turning into a Bosa or a Nick Fairley or an Ndamukong Suh, USC, I believe, has zero chance. Do you have any?
I think zero chance is harsh. Zero chance is harsh.
It would take the defense turning into a complete, a utter transformation hitherto unheard of. It would be next to impossible for that defense to go from what I saw.
I mean, does it really have to be
performance I've ever seen?
Does it have to be that kind of transformance just compared to being a team that, like I said, can they manage to get stops at the right time? Can they not give up 1,000,000 yards? Yes, you can't give up 500, 600 yards every game, but I mean, I think we're at a point in college football. It doesn't have to be otherworldly. Your defense just has to be serviceable. So I think, honestly, that's legitimately. Your defense just has to be serviceable to win a national championship. I mean, TCU's defense was serviceable. I mean, there is a couple guys on the defense.
A national championship. They lost by 70 points.
Yeah, I'm not going to defend that game. But even with that, they played for it, and they had to win a playoff game. It wasn't like they only went through. They did go through, to me, probably the undeniable number 2 team in the country. They did go through that to get there.
Hats off to TCU. I'm not going to take away from their accomplishments, but if Michigan played like they played against TCU, Ohio State beats them, Illinois beats them, and maybe 2 other teams.
You're talking Illinois beats Michigan? Okay, I think you said Illinois beats TCU. I'm like, that's a joke.
Michigan played their C- game, and TCU played their A game. Mm-hmm. So, yes, that's a fantastic win that no one can take away from them. But they got lucky a bit in that Michigan was so bad. They gifted that to them.
Yeah, I agree. But it takes a bad team to have a bad loss. So,
and that's the point. Where the playoff, you have to have that 2 times in a row, and that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. You're right. But, I mean, you are technically right that TCU didn't really have a chance for national championship because the national championship game was played at the Peach Bowl this past season. I mean, that was the real national title game this year.
Hey,
then they played the third, fourth place game at the Fiesta Bowl.
What was the lead that Ohio State had with in the fourth quarter? Was it 14 or so?
We had a 14-point lead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how many points do you think Ohio State beats TCU by?
See,
I put it at 3 touchdowns.
Comparisons are always difficult because this depends. Are you talking semifinal or national championship game? Because maybe 3 touchdowns then, but I mean, if you're going to say semifinal, I don't know. I think possibly something similar to what happened with TCU Michigan is on it because I think Ohio State had to play Georgia for them to finally wake up. For Ryan Day to actually game plan against his opponent, but at the same time be like, we know what we do best. We're going to do it. Like Ryan Day never once tried to force the running game. The only time he did was that one of those last plays on the final drive when we had just gotten in field goal range, and all of a sudden Ryan Day said, okay, we'll take a 50-yarder, we'll run the ball. Like, no, he should have kept passing. They should have went for the end zone, in my opinion. That your passing game was the best thing. They should have went for the end zone. And if they came up 15 yards short, okay, kick a 30-yard field goal. That's fine with me. But don't put it on a 50-yard line, 50-yard field goal at that point. But, anyways.
I just wanted to remind you that Ohio State choked away an easy national championship. That's all. Do you have?
I mean, take away a dirty hit on Marvin Harrison Jr. On the best player in the country, and then maybe that doesn't happen.
That was absolutely targeting, and I was disgusted at that.
Dude, the athletic training staff said he got a concussion not from the impact from hitting the ground.
Oh wow!
Yeah, his concussion came solely from the impact from the other player.
But no, totally clean though. Do you have any other points on the Pac-12, or should I tell you one more reason why it is not the best conference?
I mean, to me, they're by far returning the deepest quarterback, but I mean, they're returning the deepest teams too. Like I said, they're returning 5 teams that had 10 wins last year that are returning well more than 50% of their starting roster. Like these were younger teams in the Pac-12 that were winning games. These were not like senior loaded teams. These were young teams.
They're going to be great. I'm excited to watch them. One thing that maybe we won't be able to do in the future, this is one of my points. You know how valuable someone is or how good someone is based on what you're willing to pay them. That's why these coaches in college football make so much. These players now are making so much. If you've been following along at all with media deals, the Big Ten has secured a media deal with CBS, with Fox, with NBC, worth over $1 billion. And lately it's come out that the Pac-12, who was in talks with Amazon, with Apple TV, Amazon has stepped away. Now it's being reported that Apple TV is getting cold feet. And the most recent suitor to step in to be the media partner with the Pac-12 is Ion TV, which is one of your local stations that's probably going to be showing like Chicago PD or like NCIS.
Yeah.
If this falls through, we could be watching the Pac-12 on gas station TV in 2024. This is a conference whose product is so lower tier that they will be lucky to make a quarter of what the SEC and the Big Ten are making. Well, the good news is I'm only talking about 2023. I'm not talking about 2024. At the same time, too, I think the Pac-12's already at a tough spot because, those TV deals are a longevity thing. I'm talking about 1 year. That's a longevity thing because USC and UCLA leaving is already a big blow to any TV rights. But I think even with USC and UCLA staying, I think just the fact that college football, the way it's scheduled, revolves around the East Coast. It revolves around the East Coast and then the Midwest/South, which is all Eastern and Central time zone. All of major college football revolves around that time. And so for the Pac-12, for them to get a noon game, which, Fox has proven that noon is a great time to have a primetime game. You don't have to have the game at 7:30, 8 o'clock. Fox reports insane numbers when they have Michigan, Ohio State play at noon, or even just other big important matchups at noon. And for the Pac-12 to get that, you got to play at 9 a.m. Now, if the Pac-12 was smart, I think they would take advantage of the 3:30 window. I feel like but it's tough though because who plays their top game at 3:30 p.m.? The SEC. That's when the SEC game of the week is always there. And so, that's tough because that's just who is Alabama or who's Georgia playing this week, and both of them are going to bring in big ratings. So the Pac-12 is already at a disadvantage because then, the 8 o'clock slot is really their only chance. And, but very often, honestly, if you look at it historically,
The ACC very often dominates that 8 o'clock, 7:30 window. Like ACC, like Clemson, for some reason, like if you look back over like the last, like since Trevor Lawrence was there, they're like always the 7:30 game every single week. It feels like Clemson is always playing then. And so I think the Pac-12 is just, I think situationally, they're the team that's going to get the raw end. It's really tough to be 3 hours behind because college football starts at noon on the East Coast. That's when it starts. And I think it's extremely hard to deal with that because even though right now they have a deal with Fox, they're never going to be the big noon kickoff at noon. It's not going to happen.
Obviously, your numbers are going to suffer, but I'm a pretty big fan of Pac-12 After Dark. And I know that doesn't have any real strength towards 2023. I just had to throw that in there because I find it hilarious that this conference literally cannot find someone who wants to show their product. Let's end.
I think saying it's hilarious is fair. I think it was just a stupid comment, but that's just.
I know
that's just me.
Sometimes it's hard to understand when you're all the way down in Ohio. Do you think if you're predicting right now, if you had to put money on it, does a Pac-12 team make the playoff next year?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to say no, but seeing how you're saying yes, who is it?
It's so funny. It's so funny. Like my gut reaction is always USC or Washington because I'm really high. But I think when the more you talked about a complete team, Oregon is probably the most complete team. And so I do think Oregon would be the safest bet for a Pac-12 team to go. But at the same time, like I said, it's hard to argue against Caleb Williams and USC, in which, I mean, they really should have been in the playoff just this past year already. Like USC should have already been there. Not. They threw that opportunity away.
The thing about USC though is I watched a few of those games because I was hate watching. I was cheering for them to lose. I remember watching the Oregon State game. I believe that there was a Washington State game in there where they played with fire all season long, and it finally got them in that championship game. And that's kind of my prediction is that these teams who are going to be very good but are not going to be great or elite, and it's just going to be they're going to beat each other up. They're going to all have at least 1 or 2 losses.
They say that about the SEC every year, and then walks in Bama, Georgia, right there, all the time.
Well, no, because Bama and Georgia are elite, and they stand above, so they're not going to get beat up by the Auburns or the Mississippi States. Georgia
I think
is going to take a step back, and yet their schedule is so bad that they will not lose more than 1 game.
No, they definitely won't. But at the same time, I do think USC, Oregon, Washington, and Utah, I do think those 4 teams stand like they're clear number 4 teams. It's not like you're trying to put it. Like I do think those teams stand alone, and now you've got two teams from each conference. So, I mean, you're likely looking at the winner of the Oregon-Washington game and then the winner of the USC-Utah game as the matchup in the Pac-12 championship next year. I very much believe that the winners of those games are likely the ones who meet in the Pac-12 championship, and both at least with 10 wins when they get there.
Okay, so they're going to get in at 11-2.
So let's just say, for example, let's say 11-1 USC is playing 10-2 Oregon.
If USC wins at 11-1, I think they're in. But that's a big prediction. I'm not willing to go there yet, especially with who I see coming out from other conferences, because you didn't want to talk about them. I think Florida State.
I mean, what ACC team do you think is legitimately to be considered above those 4 Pac-12 teams?
Florida State, Clemson.
Oh my gosh.
Clemson has been there before. They have a 5-star quarterback who is figuring it out. And Florida State is returning the most production in the country. And Jordan Travis is good no matter if you think so or not. He is good. If he was playing in a purple jersey with a golden helmet, you would think he was the best quarterback in the country because he's basically just like these other quarterbacks you listed, except he plays for Florida State. He is very good. If he can stay healthy, that's been an issue for him. I don't understand this slander. I think he's top 10 quarterback returning. And Florida State, I think they're going to be contending throughout the year. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoff, but I think they've got a chance. So when you have so many contenders, I mean, you got Florida State, you got Clemson, obviously you have Georgia, you have Bama. You're going to laugh at this. Texas is always a contender.
Shut your mouth.
To see what they do. The Big 12 just intrigues me.
We should never say that name again on this podcast.
What, Texas?
Yes.
You don't like it when I say Texas?
I don't like it when you say anything even remotely close to that.
All right. Well, you're high in the Pac-12. I'm high in the Pac-12. I think they're the third best conference next year. There's just no way that they match up with the Big Ten and the SEC. But do you have something on your chest that you just got to get out into the world? Something quick?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Why is Florida State getting all this hype? I don't get it. I'm looking at all these way too early rankings for this next season, and I am sick and tired of the Florida State hype. I can't stand it. I don't get it. You want to know who I think they are? I think they're the 2021 Michigan State Spartans. That's what I think they are.
The Spartans were a loss against Purdue away from having a Big Ten championship berth.
Yeah, I mean, Florida State was a Clemson loss away from being in there, or an NC State loss away from being in there. Like, they weren't far off. I mean, or maybe even a Wake Forest loss. But, like, you look at that, like, they were only one game away from being there. I mean, like, they were both. I mean, Michigan State was 11-2, Florida State was 10-3, but the Michigan State was getting a lot of love. They were returning a quarterback who, you know, Peyton Thorne was given a lot of love, but I think it was very situational. I believe the same thing about Jordan Travis. I mean, I look at their schedule this past year. Their schedule was very favorable, very favorable.
But let me ask you, what do you think the two most important positions are in college football?
In quarterback and defensive end.
There it is.
Yes,
Jordan
they do
Travis
have two good guys.
Is a top 10 quarterback returning in college football, yes or no? I know you seem low on him, but I put him in top 10.
I wouldn't.
Why?
Whenever I watched him, there was never a game that I was like, he jumped off the screen. I'll give him credit as a competitor. Like, kid's got a great attitude. You know, in the LSU game, the LSU and Clemson games were the only two times I really watched him. Clemson game, he didn't impress me at all. LSU, I at least liked his moxie and his competitiveness and his willingness to, you know, take some big hits, move the ball with his feet, and, you know, try to make big throws. But I mean, I don't know. To me, like, I've never watched him and thought that just Jordan Travis jumps off the tape for me. I just think that he is a decent quarterback, and, you know, Florida State's a decent team, and they had a very easy schedule this past season, and I think they coasted off that.
I think he's a winning quarterback. His QBR last year was 85.8, which was good for 7th. So that's his quarterback rating. That's 7th overall last year, and that doesn't account for all those guys ahead of him, like a C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, who are no longer in college. So you remove some of those guys, and now he's top 5. Now, I'm not sure I'm going that far, but I think he's a good to very good college quarterback. Defensive end, they have Jared Verse, who would have been a first-round draft pick. I don't know why he's returning. I think he did have some injury issues. But they're going to have one of the best edge rushers in college football. They're going to have one of the best wide receivers. They've got this guy who's like 6'6". I think it's Johnny something. He is huge, and he's super fast. And he can, obviously, at 6'6", he catches everything that's thrown up for him. So he does jump balls crazy. He's really good with the deep ball. So they're going to have that going for them. Their offensive and defensive lines are returning a lot of production. So there's going to be continuity there. And their schedule is favorable again. So
their schedule is tougher. Their schedule is a lot tougher.
Do you think
this next
tough?
season?
I was looking at it. I didn't think it looked that bad.
It's tougher compared to this year. It's definitely.
What's so tough about it?
I mean, they got to play Clemson on the road.
Yeah, but they're ACC. They're going to play Clemson.
I mean, yeah, you got to play Clemson on the road. You got to play Florida on the road.
Always play Florida.
think they get. I know exactly. Like I said, every year, like it's like a lot of their conference teams. Like I think
Florida's
they
be so bad next year, so bad. They're a basement SEC team next year.
It wouldn't surprise me if
but it's
Florida beat Florida State.
It's,
Even with that, just compare. Like it wouldn't surprise me if Florida won that game. But I mean, I'm just looking at some tough things. I mean, like a 19-17 loss when I think Devin Leary was already injured at that point, not even playing. I mean, they got beat by Wake Forest at home. They couldn't beat Clemson at home. I mean, the only good win on their schedule this past year was LSU. That early game in the season. It was Brian Kelly's first game at LSU. It was Jaden Daniels' first game. And honestly, that game was kind of a circus for LSU. Like you saw the blocked PAT. Malik Neighbors had that fumble on that punt that they got, but then Florida State did find a way to fumble that ball on the goal on like the 0-yard line or whatever. Like that game was just a circus early in the year. I think Florida State had returned more just this past year, and LSU was basically a new team that I think Florida State literally just held together. They blocked that PAT, and then they ended up winning by 1 point. I honestly expect LSU to beat them by 2 scores minimum beginning of next season.
That's absolutely possible, and they could still go through the ACC, which is a low conference.
I don't think they're going to implode the way Michigan State did, but I think they're an 8-4, 7-5 team this next year. They'll still be in a bowl game. They'll still have a winning record. But I don't see that. Like I just like if you told me you wanted to put them at number 9 or number 10, that's fine, dude. ESPN, Sports Illustrated, and USA Today all have Florida State ranked above Alabama. Why?
That's crazy.
You're talking like three news articles that cover college football heavily, and they're all involved in important rankings in some way. ESPN, Sports Illustrated, USA Today. Why is Florida State ranked above Alabama?
No,
tell me that.
That's
like I said, I'm not trying to tell you that Florida State's going to be bad. I do not get this top 5 hype for Florida State. I do not understand it at all.
I think that they're probably top 10.
I even think that's pushing it.
10 to I think they should be at around 10 to 11 wins next year, and if they have some good breaks, then they could break through and win the ACC. But no, I don't think that they're a top 5 team, and I just think that they're going to be. I think your Michigan State comparison, if they were a 2021 Michigan State, that would be a great year for them because they would be about 11 wins. They would have a player like a Kenneth Walker who gets national attention, and they'd go to a major bowl game. I'm not saying that they're going to go to the playoff, but like Michigan State, deep into the year, they would be competing to possibly get there.
I'm saying Florida State this past season was comparable to Michigan State 2020-21, not what's coming up this year. I'm saying this past year. I think they're dipping. I think they're getting too much.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing Florida State go 5-7, miss a bowl game, and at that point,
dude, I'd be so happy.
For sure that poor coach will be collecting his paycheck.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't get it. Like I said, like they barely beat that Florida team at home. They barely beat Oklahoma, who was in shambles and who was 6-6 in a bowl game. I mean, the only win where I'm like, okay, that really jumps off the screen to me was, I mean, maybe even not that much, but they rocked Miami, Florida, like in Miami, like 45-3. I'll give them credit for that. It was on the road, although Miami was rough this year.
I mean, point out I asked for their tough games, and you gave me Clemson and Florida. And Clemson is, yes, they're at the top of the ACC, but they're not the Clemson of old. It's not a game that they cannot win. And Florida is trash. I already said that. Yes, it's a rivalry game, but if that's like their second tough game, that's a pretty cushy schedule. But I agree. What you have just said.
The Virginia Tech game is going to be tough.
Ranked as high as they are. Virginia
Tech
is trash.
I think Virginia Tech will be decent next year, serviceable.
What is decent?
6-6, and I think that's good enough to beat Florida State.
Oh. All right, so yeah,
they got to play like two of their crossover games: Virginia Tech and Pitt.
Pitt
In ACC standards, that's tough. And we're just looking at Florida State competing in the ACC, in which they just found a way to grind out some games against teams that just weren't really anything at all.
And now they have an entire team of those guys who learned how to grind out wins returning.
We'll see, dude. Their first 4 games of the year is LSU, Southern Miss, at Boston College, at Clemson. So we'll find out quickly if Florida State's got something or not.
Yeah,
but,
that's true. They could
but
be
dude, I wouldn't be shocked if they were 1-3.
Ooh.
They could be
right.
LSU, at Boston College, at Clemson.
We are going to return to this, and we are going to set an over-under for Florida State's win total, maybe when we cover the ACC. And we're going to make a little wager on this.
5th game, Virginia Tech. Florida State, 1-4. 1-4.
All right, we'll make that interesting. We'll think about how we want to do that. Are you ready for my rant? Because I got to get this out there.
Yes.
About a month late.
I'm very interested then.
This news dropped basically right after we recorded our last podcast, and I was ticked because it's something that has always been near and dear to my heart. If you listen to the parent podcast, Jonesing for Sports, you know I have a love-hate relationship with Iowa football. And you know what happened recently? Those cowards. Iowa football has a new contract for their offensive coordinator, Brian Ferentz. Now, if you're saying, Brian Ferentz, that last name sounds familiar. Ferentz, where's that? That's right. His dad is the head coach. Now, you might think to yourself, that sounds a little bit like nepotism, and you would be right to think that. But they've also thought of that, and they have a loophole. They've had a system to work around it. The athletic director, Gary Barta, is actually Brian Ferentz's boss. He's the one who hired him. It wasn't Daddy. It wasn't Papa Ferentz. So he is the one who actually has to fire him when the time comes. Now, this new contract, the reporters got their hands on it. There are 2 stipulations for Brian to keep his job next year. Now, just for the record, last year, according to Football Outsiders metrics, Iowa had the 111th offense. Now, if you go back to the past couple years before that, that's about the ballpark they've been in, the low hundreds to upper 80s and 90s, which is generally just bad. He should have already been fired, but they get this new contract that says, Brian, you have to do 2 things to keep your job next year. The offense has to score 25 points a game, and we have to win 7 games. If we do those things, we'll renew your contract. Oh, by the way, they did dock his pay by $50,000, which to me would be a big deal. To Brian, who was making $900,000, not too bad. But he would get that money back if he's able to fulfill this new contract.
Okay.
Let me explain something for you real quick. 25 points a game. Do you have a guess? If you score 25 points a game, where would that land you in the ranks of college football offenses?
I mean, I can't see it being in the top 75.
That is an excellent guess because it's 85th.
Okay.
Last year, if you were to score 25 points, you would have been 85th in total offense. They are not asking him to excel. In fact, I would say 85th out of 130 teams, they're asking him to just be really bad. They don't want him to be terrible. They just want him to be really bad. 25 points per game, 85th in the country, and 7 wins would be basically just making a bowl game, and if you're 6-6 winning it, or if you're 7-5 losing it. That is the bare minimum. By the way, do you have a guess as to what Football Outsiders metrics had the defense ranked last year? So the offense was 111th.
I mean, they had to be top 15.
Top 1.
They were number 1?
Overall.
They're the best defense?
According to Football Outsiders metrics, they were ranked the number 1 defense. And when you write number 1 for offense, you have to add 2 more ones for the defense because there's 111th. So you see those difference in digits there. Phil Parker, the defensive coordinator, is coordinating his butt off, and then little buddy Brian, who can't get his finger out of his nose, is coordinating a terrible offense. And if he just gets it to less than mediocre, below average, they're going to give him more money and renew his contract. How do you face the good people of Iowa, those corn-fed, faithful fans who have been nothing but good to your program, who love it more than anything, and you're going to say, yes, mediocrity, that's all we need? Furthermore, you are so cowardly that you're going to pass the buck to math, to numbers. I can't see with my eyes that this offense is completely inept. And so I am going to just leave it up to the numbers. And what's going to happen if in the last game they need to score like 4 more points, but they're down a field goal? What is Brian going to do? What are they going to do on defense? Are they going to start sending on 3rd and 15, there's going to be all-out blitz because they need to force a fumble for a touchdown? By the way, Iowa's defense and special teams scores more points than anyone else. So if you count in Iowa's defensive scores, their field goals, everything, their punt blocks and field goal blocks, return for touchdowns, it's more like he's got to score like 17 or 18 offensive points. I mean, this is a low bar. I mean, this bar is so low. He doesn't barely have to duck to get under it. I mean, it's like he's gonna have to get on roller skates and he's gonna have to get completely flat on the ground. It's a low bar, and I am just furious for the people of Iowa. And yet, as a complete sicko, I am going to watch with such intent. I am going to have a countdown of 325, because if he scores 325 points this year, he will keep his job, and if they win 7 games. And so every game, every point, 324, 323. I am going to be glued to the screen. If Michigan's not on, maybe Alabama's playing a game against like Texas. No, I'm watching Iowa, South Dakota, because they've got to get their 50 in against this FCS school rather than their 7 they got. Iowa is going to be must-watch TV. I'm sick for the fans. This is gross. Gary Barta, do your job. Coach Ferentz, do your job.
Brian Ferentz, not sure if I want you to do your job.
Like, seriously, like if you're the defensive coordinator, do you tank games for the greater good?
No, you keep working your way up to get a head coaching job. Do you think if in that 12th game when Iowa's 6-5 and going into that game they're averaging 24.8 points a game, and all of a sudden at the end when they have a chance to get over both of those humps, they throw an interception? Do you think Kirk Ferentz is going to take Brian and just place him over his knee and start wailing on him the same way Michael Scott did to his nephew?
Look, I think
that would be must-see TV.
It's well overdue at this point because the discipline has been absent. Brian is doing whatever he wants, and I'm excited because now they're probably going to be in a situation where they're going to start having like 2-point conversions that really matter. They're going to be up 30, but they're going for 2. And Brian Ferentz has got to give his absolute best. So I'm excited. I'm frustrated for Iowa, but man.
So with Cade McNamara there now,
Cade McNamara and Eric All.
And is Sean Laporta back, or did he go pro?
He's going to pro.
Okay, so Eric All gets more attention there. If you had to bet $500 on Iowa achieving those things, now knowing with Cade and with those guys, what are you betting on? Do you think they get the 25 points a game? Do you think they get 7 wins?
They will get 7 wins because Iowa always gets 7 or 8 wins. That was like why they even write that in the contract. Like that's a given. It's like
can you please
breathe air?
Can you please be the mediocre that we've always been since Kirk Ferentz has been there?
I'm 100% split because I do not believe in Brian Ferentz. And I think that they do have a lot of work to do in the trenches. But I think that Cade McNamara is a huge upgrade. And at the same time, if I am a Iowa rival, and let's say that Wisconsin, who's going to have this high-flying offense, hopefully, is up 20 in the fourth quarter, and the game's in hand, I think maybe they let off the gas defensively and maybe let some garbage time points in, because I'd rather face Brian Ferentz than literally any other offensive coordinator next year. I think you could see a little bit of that. So I'll say, yeah, they make it. It will be close. It would come down to probably the bowl game where they really have to have their best stuff. And I think in these non-conference games, you're going to see the offense really come out throwing the ball, actually, compared to last year where they had a game they scored 7 points, and it was because they had 2 field goals. No, what was it? 2 safeties and 1 field goal. There's going to be more touchdowns scored. So, yeah, I'll give them the 25.
Okay.
But I don't got to like it because they're going to score 25 points a game, and it's still going to be terrible offense.
All right, I'm going to give you notable games for Iowa this next season. And you let me know right now what the win total is. So, speaking of rivalry games, they play at Iowa State. Like I said, Just keep in mind. You don't have to tell me who wins or lost. Just keep in mind. They play at Iowa State. They have their 3 crossover games. They get Michigan State at home. They get Rutgers at home. They're at Penn State.
Okay.
Within their division, notable games that they have to go on the road: Wisconsin, Nebraska. They get Illinois, Purdue, and Minnesota at home. Where would you put their win total at right now?
7.
You'd say 7? They barely squeak by. They get 7. They get 7 wins. They average 26 points per game on offense.
No, I said I'm setting the line at the over/under at 7.
That's where you're setting the line.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that most likely they'll hit over. But I could see.
Do you think?
But I think 8 is probably attainable.
So I don't think they're beating Wisconsin at Wisconsin this year. I think you had a good point. They play at Nebraska. How do you see that game?
Honestly, some of these teams like Wisconsin or Nebraska with these new coaches, I have no idea what to expect. So
because it'll be tougher because both teams will be established. The Wisconsin game is mid-October, and Nebraska is this new force-fed rivalry they're giving the Iowa fans that they keep throwing at the end of the year because they're like, Iowa. You guys both have corn, so you guys got to have it. I think they're going to get drilled by Penn State when they go to Penn State.
They should.
And I wouldn't be shocked if Michigan State beat them. Now, would I consider Iowa the favorite? I would consider Iowa the favorite. But is it going to shock you if Michigan State wins that game?
At Iowa?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be surprised.
This is the week after the Penn State game. It's the week after the Penn State game.
It's a rebound.
It depends, though.
Depends
what that rebound is.
Completely flaming out, yes. But history tells me that they will win 7 or 8 games. And there's the possibility that they win the West. That is a real possibility because they've done it.
Just speaking of the Big Ten West, this was something I meant to bring up to you earlier just for the heck of it. So when I was going through the Pac-12, SEC, and Big Ten and looking at their returning quarterbacks and putting all the production, I was going through all of them, and I went through all the Big Ten teams, and I got to Minnesota. And so for the teams that didn't have a returning quarterback, I just wanted to make a note about what the team was. My note for Minnesota was Muhammad Ibrahim rushed for more yards than Tanner Morgan threw last season.
Wow. To be fair, he did deal with injuries, but
Tanner Morgan threw for 1,200 yards.
That's because it's Ethan Kaliakmanis time.
Minnesota is going to have a losing record next year.
I hope not, but yeah, I'm worried.
No, they are. It's over. It's done.
Over. That's strong. Believe in the process.
I'm trying to even see what. It's so funny that the rest of you guys have a Big 12 team, or a Big 10 West team that you guys love, like Cody has, Nebraska. Travis has Purdue. You've had Iowa and all that. And I'm going to be honest, like when you
it's Minnesota. Minnesota is my team I cheer for. Iowa is my hate watch team.
It's Iowa. I can't remember the last time you talked about Minnesota besides the occasional PJ Fleck reference. But besides that,
I'm a little bit down on Minnesota too. I don't want to. It's sensitive.
Dude, if we went back and looked at it, you might have talked about Iowa more than you talked about Ohio State in 2022.
That's probably true. Iowa does have me. They have a hold on me. I'll be real about that.
I'm trying to even think who would be my other team in college football that I don't even
all know deep down, but
I don't even know. I mean, I guess for a little bit, part of me wanted to almost say Cincinnati, just because they're in Ohio, and I have a lot of family that lives in Cincinnati, and I've had friends and family go there. But OSU plays them every 5 or 6 years, and so you still see them as an opponent, not someone else in there. And I do not care about the MAC at all, and Ohio is
How dare you.
the heart of the MAC conference, and I've had friends try to tell me I should care about the Ohio Bobcats, but I just green is not a color I can get behind. And if I don't like your team's uniforms and your team's colors, I'm not going to root for you. That's actually because of that, I do have somewhat of an affinity for Virginia Tech, because I remember it was 2010 or 2011. They debuted those all black uniforms with the holographic neon orange numbers or whatever. I was like, that was the best college football uniform I've ever seen. So I do have somewhat of an affinity for Virginia Tech because of those uniforms.
Well, speaking of great team colors, come on over to the brown and gold. Western Michigan.
Michigan, the Broncos, man. I remember watching you play NCAA 12, and just every time, I would play it, and Brandon's like, "Oh, what team are you at now? What team are you doing for Dynasty?" And every time I watch Brandon play, it's just Western Michigan and nothing else. Brandon, aren't you tired of the 10th season? No, I need another national championship.
Got to beat Ohio State.
Dude, speaking of uniforms, I don't know if you've ever watched the sports show Crane and Company before.
No.
Technically a product of Daily Wire and over there, but they were looking at a few national arguments, and they were trying to, they pulled up actual big time college football writers, and everyone was ranking their best college football helmets, and nearly unanimously the number one helmet was Ohio State.
That's garbage. Absolute trash.
The colors are so much better. Dude, that silver helmet with the line down the middle. And now I actually was open because David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback, is one of the main guys on the show. Mm-hmm. So he's one of the few guys. So he was I'll have to send you the clip. The dude was losing his mind when everyone else was Ohio State's the best helmet. It's actually really funny, but he actually made a
basic helmet with pot stickers.
Dude, that's what the people want, man.
Oh, that's garbage.
Dude, the stickers are so popular that Michigan started putting stickers on their helmet. It's so popular.
No, stickers are great, but I'm saying it's not. That's an accent. It's not what the helmet is.
Dude, even without this,
from Ohio State, what is it? It's a silver helmet with a red stripe.
That's what makes them so good. Look at Penn State, white helmet.
That's what I just said. That is basic.
Notre Dame, that golden dome.
All right. Well, there's a huge difference between. I've been to Notre Dame at night, and you have a golden dome helmet where the lights that are coming down are reflecting off. So they are literally glowing out there.
Dude,
They're
it's
almost
just
giving off their own light. So Notre Dame's golden helmet, while it's all one solid color, it is way better than Penn State's or Ohio State's.
It's just funny though, because Michigan fans think the winged helmet is really cool. It's really not. It's really not that great.
That's probably because you see it through hate, and I'm going to redirect that hate into more hate. Tell me, let's wrap up with this.
Okay.
What are you confident in, or what are you seeing in Michigan or seeing in Ohio State that gives you confidence that next year's going to be different? Just wait till November. Just wait. What is
I think the number one thing to be optimistic about is Michigan's really good at cheating. Harbaugh's got all these violations and scandals that are coming his way now, all these level ones. So
tell me that's not your best.
I think that he has done a really good job of trying to break the rules and doing it, and maybe just now, but maybe he's good at not getting caught. I mean, you can't just buy kids cheeseburgers. That's the equivalent of taking steroids. So
I am disappointed.
So no optimism. Number one, the returning players. I mean, JJ, Blake Corum. I mean, it's hard to find. I mean, in the country, I don't think you could find a better QB1, RB1 duo that's returning in the country. Like it's the best. I mean, getting Blake Corum to come back was huge. I think a lot of you guys thought you'd seen him play for the last time when he went down against Illinois. Because I mean, the running back draft this year is kind of weak. Like, there's not a lot of good running backs. Like Corum would have been second round minimum, and so that, I mean, your returns are huge. I mean, that's a huge reason to be optimism. I think another reason is you've proven it. 2 years in a row. Like it's like the 2021 wasn't this like emotional thing that Michigan got. Like they didn't strike gold at the right time. Like Michigan's legit. Like you have all the reason to believe when you can win back-to-back Big Ten championships. You went to Columbus and beat Ohio State, which, very few teams have done in the last 15, 20 years. It's not just Michigan that was struggling to win there. It was everybody who was struggling to win there. And so Michigan has proven that, this Big Ten championship contender, Big Ten championship winner, number one team in the Big Ten is proven. Michigan also raked in possibly one of the best transfer portal classes we've ever seen this offseason. Like
about that.
The D-line, that linebacker they got from Nebraska. I mean, all their O-line came back, but yet they got like the top two tackles in the transfer portal. So, I mean, like you're like 8 deep on, like you've got 5 starters and then like 3 bench guys who are like all NFL linemen. Michigan could possibly run for over 3,000 yards as a team next year. That's not easy to do, but I mean, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, Harbaugh is like, look at all these linemen I've got. Dude is about to run the ball like nothing else next year. I know you guys all want to unleash JJ, but I mean, dude is having them. Dude, Harbaugh will have the best running back tandem and the best O-line tandem he's ever had as a college coach. That dude is running the ball 60 times a game. So
I certainly hope it's not 60.
Yeah, I think another reason for optimism, I think the schedule is extremely favorable for Michigan next year. I think there's not a single game they're not favored in next year, if I'm not mistaken.
I could see
like the Vegas, where the Vegas odds, where they're at right now.
The at Penn State could flip.
That's going to be tough. I mean, that's the whiteout next year. That's a very guarantee. When is that game? Is it mid-October?
I don't have it in front of me, but
Okay.
it should be right around then. You actually are throwing me off because I thought you were going to say something about why you'd be optimistic about Ohio State. And I have prepared something that would be really mean now. I'd feel like a jerk if I just talked about how bad Ohio State's going to be. So,
all I did was tell you were a bunch of cheaters, but,
well, you know what? We need to cheat more. I'll be honest. I mean, if we could cheat at a level equivalent to Ohio State,
then we'd all be Georgia. We could cheat. We'd be Georgia and Bama. We're just
compete nationally a little bit more effectively. Oh, so I gotta change on the fly here because I was.
Stick to it.
You're gonna make me out to be the Michigan elitist. I'll do both. I'll start with a negative. I'll end with positive because.
Well, I didn't even say my negatives. You didn't even give me a chance.
Oh, you got it. Let's hear it.
Negatives. I think there's definitely a fear of a big defensive step back. I mean, like I said, there's guys coming in, yes, but I mean, the last 2 years, you guys are shipping a lot of guys out at a lot of important positions. And so, I mean, like, Michigan will still have quality players, but I mean, can it be the defense that just, minus the TCU game, a lot of times when they really needed it, the defense is what came in and just made the difference for games that allowed Michigan to really, really excel. There could be an exposed defense, while a lot of guys, Ohio State brings back, without a doubt, the best skill position room in the country. If you look around you look around the whole positions of wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, there could be that. Penn State's offense could potentially be scary next year. Nick Singletary. I can't remember which one it is. Might be Singleton. That kid's no joke. That kid's going to be Saquon Barkley levels. And they have another great freshman running back too. The wide receiver depth is, to me, a big concern. There's still not that clear number one, that clear playmaker that, if in a moment could you just throw the ball up to him and you're confident that guy's going to come down and make a play. Like I said, is there talent in Michigan's receiver room? Yeah, of course. There's good talent. I think Roman Wilson is a really good receiver, but at the same time, Roman Wilson hasn't had that just take over a game. You can put the ball in my hands while, even though OSU lost the game, we were competing with Georgia because of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right.
And then because of Marvin Harrison Jr., Ibuka and Fleming started to get more open as the game went on. That third quarter against Georgia, Ohio State was starting to cruise. They were starting to cruise. And so, does Michigan have any of those guys? Because, like I said, you would know this better, but who are the up-and-comer receivers outside of the guys that were just there this past season? Who's the guys waiting in the wins? Were there any big recruits coming in for that? You could answer that question for me. And then the other thing for me is this will be controversial. This will really spin you a little bit, but you find out that JJ is good, but he's not the guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's good, but he's not the guy. We know he's got talent. He's got a Brett Favre-esque arm. If he wants to, he can scream it and he'll take some big risks, but can he actually go out and be the reason Michigan, wins a big game? I think he definitely took a step forward in the Ohio State game, but I still look at that game as just Michigan as a team took that game from Ohio State and just shoved it right down their throats in the third and fourth quarter. But I think that's the other big pessimism is JJ. JJ is good, but he's not the guy. I think he still has to. I'm still waiting for that one game where, you're playing against a team and it feels like, and it's looking like, this team could get Michigan. We might lose, and then JJ starts making play after play after play and does enough to get Michigan a win. Which, to your credit, maybe you guys never have to find yourself in that situation.
Right.
But at the same time, there was TCU, which is where you did need him to do play after play, and he made play, but every time there was something good, it came with something bad. And it's probably the center's fault, but he had the game in his hands at the end of the game. JJ had the chance, and even though on fourth down there was that bad snap, there was still third down, there was still second down, there was still first down, there were still other times for JJ to make a play, and he didn't. He didn't do it at the end of the day. So, but he's only a sophomore. He's a true sophomore. He'll be his third year. We'll see. But JJ is undoubtedly a top 10 returning QB. To me, he's got something to prove. He's a top 5.
Yeah, I wouldn't be worried that he's not the guy. I'd be more worried that they don't let him until it becomes a TCU situation.
And that's what I was saying earlier. Harbaugh is okay, maybe some things I can't say. But just the thoughts he is having about his offensive line and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. That dude probably has nice dreams every single night he goes to bed right now. So
I'm picking up what you're laying down there. Wide receivers, they're really technically only replacing one guy. They did have a transfer out who we were high on, but he also had 100 total yards last season.
Anthony, right?
Yeah. Ronnie Bell is the guy who is going to be probably drafted. And if you ask the fan base, some people love him, some people hate him. And Travis
is a hater, right?
I think there could be a pendulum where it just depends on the day. And
okay.
I think he is a perfectly serviceable I would say he's a heady receiver in that he's good at being in the right place, not necessarily the most talented. And if some of these guys who are younger, who are more talented, can get the upperclassman level experience and the know-how, that the ceiling could be higher. I'd say the floor is definitely lower. You point out Roman Wilson. I think he should be a elite receiver if given the chance. He's a really good route runner, and he's one of the fastest players on the team. And as Ohio State fans know, Cornelius Johnson is returning. He torched Ohio State to the tune of 2 touchdowns in the game last year. They do have some freshmen who will be sophomores next year coming up, and I think it's really going to be a 2-man show. Kind of like where Ohio State has the 2 guys, Harrison and Ekbuka. I think it's going to be to a much lesser extent, but they're going to rely heavily on Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson, and of course the tight ends. They're going to have 2 tight ends that are going to probably both eclipse 300 to 400 yards receiving, and those will be their probably second and third options. I mean, one of those tight ends is going to have more yards than our second wide receiver.
What happens when Loveland is the top receiver next year? He's your Travis Kelce.
That's the dream, and they
is it even if he's only at like 700 yards.
That's what they want him to be. They want him to be more like a Brock Bowers, where this guy is going to be heavily involved in the passing game.
He'll have to be.
They're going to want,
especially with the run game. Like with the big run game, tight ends are huge. But I mean, when you're talking about Cornelius Johnson, like I said, he's a good receiver. Can he make the big plays when he's not wide open?
That's the question. And I would say to this point, no. But he also has led Michigan in receiving previously. That year that Ronnie Bell was injured, he led the team, and I believe he might have led the team the year before that too. When
Cade the Great was the quarterback?
That's right. Cade really liked Cornelius. So I think those 2 guys are going to be really good. And they're not on Ohio State's level at all. But I actually think that Roman Wilson does have a high ceiling, that he could be if they were to choose to try to feature him, I think he could actually be a higher draft pick because he's got all the tools.
If you were allowed to trade in college football, would you trade Roman Wilson for Julian Fleming?
No, I don't think I would. I do believe, this is maybe me transitioning to your positives, I truly believe that Harrison and Ekbuka are the number 1 and number 2 receivers in college football. Actually, out at Washington, they might have some arguments there at number 2.
They might be 3 and 4.
They're probably 3 and 4, but Harrison is the conclusive number 1. I think it's a shame that he has to play another year of college football because he would be the number 1 receiver drafted this year. He is a freak, and I admire him, but man, I hate that man.
If he was smart, if Harrison was smart, he would have went right to the XFL this year and been like, 3 seasons under my belt, and then go get drafted this year.
He could get a hamstring injury and nurse that all season long.
He could get a hamstring injury in practice. So, I see what you did there. I don't know, because it's not like he sat out. Like, Njigba tried to play on like 3 other times during the season.
Oh, no, I actually do think he tried. I just had to. I'm going to throw as many jabs.
The only caveat is he might have been healthy for the Georgia game. Oh, I think that's the one argument. Like, I do listen to. Like, he might have been healthy for Georgia and just said no. Like, when OSU still had a chance for a national championship, but after that, like I said, sometimes it's tough. Smith and Jigba was amazing, but who knows? Maybe Smith and Jigba was at his best because you had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. What all of a sudden happens. And then because of that, we learned what we have in Marvin Harrison Jr. because, you didn't have to make sure Smith and Jigba got 15 targets a game.
I would say he was at his best when they were gone because he set a record in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, that Rose Bowl game. Well, I mean.
As the number 1 target.
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see where he ends up in the draft. I think he's a fantastic wide receiver if healthy.
I've seen a lot of mock drafts. He falls to the Eagles.
Oh, I hate that. No, don't let him get to the Eagles. They don't need more talent.
That'd be scary. Dude, just quick side thing too. Like one of my favorite things in the NFL right now is like, dude, my least favorite people in all of sports are draft experts. They don't know shit. I'm sorry. They don't know anything. They're so wrong all the time. All they said was there is no way Jalen Hurts is ever going to be a good NFL quarterback. Tua is like the future. Mac Jones is going to be a stud. No, Jalen Hurts is eons ahead of both of those guys. Like, it's not close. Jalen Hurts is unbelievable. And it's like they don't know anything. Remember when Josh Rosen was the second coming of Christ?
Well, to be fair though, compare Jalen Hurts now to Jalen Hurts who got benched at Alabama, or even Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma. That Oklahoma team, while still very good and offensively explosive, was not as good as Oklahoma teams led by Baker Mayfield or even Kyler Murray. And yet he was able to develop at a fantastic franchise, the Eagles.
I mean, it's only his third year in the NFL.
Yes,
he's the same.
And in year 3, he was
the NFL MVP. He was the MVP this past season. I don't care what anyone says. He was the MVP.
Is predicting development is insanely difficult. Like a Josh Allen, they actually hit that one right because everyone was high on Josh Allen, and he was not good in college, but he had the body for it. And I thought he was going to be a bust. I'll be honest.
Another quick segment, because like I told you, for some reason I listen to a lot of like YouTube things that end up talking about the Detroit Lions. Where do you stand on the idea of the Lions drafting Anthony Richardson with the 18th pick?
So I hate it because I think Anthony Richardson, for what his performance was in college, should be a mid-round pick, a developmental pick, that it's possible he could be a boom prospect or a bust prospect.
What if he's the next Josh Allen and you missed out?
I think that I'm willing to take that because I think that that's entirely possible. What I have seen so far is he's not a good quarterback. He's just not. And it would take insane amount of coaching and development that I don't know is going to happen. We need a backup quarterback, but you don't need a backup quarterback at 18.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point. You do not draft a backup quarterback in the first round. I'm trying to remember who the comparison I heard to him recently was.
Cam Newton?
No, like an actual like good one, like someone who was big bodied and had all the traits, but then just did nothing in the NFL.
Russell.
Yeah, like that's a great one, but it was someone somewhat recently. I'm trying to remember the comparison I heard of what they think he's going to be. It was someone within the last couple years. Like it was a lot more recently. Someone who was big, had all the tools, and just hasn't flamed out. I'll have to find out, but
no, I'm not on the Anthony Richardson train for the value. Although it's entirely possible with his physical traits, he could blow up. But with Jalen Hurts, he was drafted in like the 3rd or 4th or 5th round. I'm not sure which.
Okay.
He was a middle round guy.
He was 2nd round.
Are you sure?
I'm fairly confident on that one that Jalen Hurts is drafted in the 2nd round.
Well, I think personally, even going to the 2nd round, the difference between 1st and 2nd round or 3rd round, whatever it is huge. With a 1st round draft pick, you need to be drafting a instant impact type player, a starter. 2nd round. I don't mind drafting a quarterback that might be a project on the 2nd day. On the 1st day, I personally, as a team, as a franchise that has not won a playoff game in my lifetime, I need a sure thing. That's why I really liked Aiden Hutchinson. I knew he was going to be, at minimum, very good. I didn't know if he'd be elite.
Did he get robbed?
Huh?
Did he get robbed of Defensive Rookie of the Year?
No, he did not. Because Sauce Gardner was an All-Pro as a
he's the best cornerback in the league.
Right. Any other year, he would win, but I had no problem with Sauce winning it because he was so good. You stack up Hutchinson's stats with like the Bosas as rookies, and his are comparable, if not better.
Dude, I think what you need to like, dude. Honestly, like I actually fully believe like the Lions are becoming my second NFL team.
They should.
I relate. I like, dude. We relate so much. Like I'm a Browns fan, so I mean, we relate. We get the struggles that
Get off of that
each other's
Browns
franchises have had.
bandwagon. The Browns are employing a gross quarterback that they're stuck to,
And we're gonna have a losing record
the
with
Lions
him.
are on the way up. So
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, like we were on the way up with Baker Mayfield too, you know. But like I said, like with the pasts and the struggles and the hurts, like I'm not just saying right now in the present, just like in a historical basis, like Browns and Lions fans share a lot of like traumas and stuff. But
yeah,
I think, dude, I've like
to another.
The best thing the Lions could do though is pretend they have high interest in Anthony Richardson, because what happens when someone trades up for Bryce Young, Stroud goes number 2. And then someone at 3 or 4 is like, oh, I've got to get Will Levis. We don't want to miss out on Will Levis. They take him. And then what happens at pick 5, someone's like, okay, we've heard the Lions really like Anthony Richardson. We know we need a QB. He's the only other first-round QB. Someone trades up for 5. If you get 4 QBs taken ahead of you, that means you get Jalen Carter or Will Anderson.
Well, I definitely originally would have said Jalen Carter for the needs of our team. But after, I don't know if you've up to date on the reports with Jalen Carter being arrested, I'll take Will Anderson.
I read into it. I don't think it's going to be anything. The only charge is that, like, basically the scenario is the 2 cars were racing. That's it.
But he was racing the car that crashed and then left the scene.
He was there and he gave accounts at.
He left the scene and came back.
Came back
an hour and a half later, which is very bad.
I don't think it's gonna. I still think Stetson Bennett's look is worse. Dude's a tool bag. I mean, I can see that if you knew those people, like, you'd have to be in a ton of shock after that. But I don't know. I'm also not the best person to, give the account of what's the best in that. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to affect his draft stock, because there's really only like 3 defensive linemen in this draft who you're like, that's who you go after. It's Anderson, Jalen Carter, and this kid from Texas Tech. Like, all you need is 3 QBs taken ahead of you to be guaranteed one of those 3 defensive players: Carter, Anderson, or Texas Tech kid.
Well, there's a massive gap, in my opinion, between Carter, Anderson, and any other defensive player.
Dude, this kid from Texas is getting a lot of love. I've seen some mock drafts where he's the first defensive player taken.
Well, as you had said before, these draft experts might not know what they're talking about.
That's true. Good point. Thanks for bringing me back to reality. Good Lord, I needed that. I needed that badly. All right, hey, you got to give me your OSU positives and negatives.
We've gotten plenty off topic there. I'll just wrap up with this very quickly. I've got a few negatives for the Buckeyes, and I will save them. I'll ration them.
I've got 3 written down. So I'll be curious if they're the same.
I'm not going to give you all of them just for the sake of time. And plus, I got to hang on to them. They're precious morsels that it gives me hope to think of some of these negatives, because I do think there's some glaring weaknesses. In years past, I didn't necessarily have as many to hang on to. I am a little bit worried for your offensive line. Looking at who you're losing and then who is stepping into those roles, I mean, you're losing probably a top 10 pick in Paris Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
DeJuan Jones is a monster of a man, and no one can fit in his shoes, literally. So you're right and your left tackle and your center. I mean, that is your heart, brain, and lungs of your offensive line. You're returning 2 guards.
Mm-hmm.
And I generally keep up with recruiting, but looking at the names that are pegged to replace them weren't names that I immediately recognized. Where in the past, oh yeah, I recognize the name Nicholas Petit-Frere because I remember he was a 5-star that Michigan was in on. Or, I remember, what was his name? Fryer, or I think there was maybe a Pryor I'm thinking of. But I usually know these names like, oh yeah, of course he's going to be really good. I'm at least looking at names on a roster, the guys replacing these studs, and to go on the other side of the coin, I really do believe Michigan is going to have a really good defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are down on Michigan's defensive line because we're going to be losing Mike Morris. We're going to be losing Mozzie Smith.
Then the one transfer kid who's been at like 18 different schools, didn't he leave as well?
That was actually my most surprising transfer. Iabioki is going to Charlotte, which he was our second leading sack.
Wasn't he good last year?
He was good. He did not get a ton of snaps, though, which was shocking. But even so, the guys that are going to be stepping up, there are some people who thought that Chris Jenkins, who is on the defensive line, he's more of like a defensive tackle. Some people thought he could have been drafted in the first round or two, and he returned. We've got some really good guys coming back next to him on the defensive line to replace Mozzie Smith. And defensive end is upperclassmen who were highly rated recruits, as well as a transfer that they're pretty high on. So I'm not going to say we're going to have an Ojabo or a Hutchinson or even like a Chase Winovich type, but I think the defensive line will be similar to last year, opportunistic, and they're going to have at least one or two guys that are going to be first team All Big Ten types.
That's all you need. Like I said, opportunistic is a great way. I do think Ohio State's defensive line has the most potential currently right now, but I would say Michigan is a much more proven commodity at defensive line in recent years.
Yeah. So Michigan does not have a JTT on the defensive line. They just don't. But they also are going to have an offensive line better equipped to handle a JTT than I believe Ohio State is going to have. So that's my
a big deal.
reason for optimism, because I think that offensive line is going to possibly struggle.
That'd be pessimism, right?
That'd be pessimism for you, because I want Ohio State to lose every single game.
Okay.
However, one reason they're not going to lose every game is those guys I already talked about. Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka. You mentioned what's his face, but I think he's not been as good as I thought he'd be.
Fleming. I think it's just because he doesn't get as many targets. Like he had half the targets that Egbuka had last year.
But the thing is Ohio State has usually been good about getting multiple receivers involved. I mean, I think back to Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Smith and Jigba. All three of those guys were hitting like 1,000 yards. So, but the guy that I actually think is overlooked nationally and even in the conference is Trevion Henderson.
I have him down.
He could be one of the best backs in the country.
I have him down as Ohio State's most important player for 2023.
And Mayan Williams is returning, right?
Yeah. But
so those two guys, I mean, you're going to have a rushing attack. If that offensive line, that's the key. If that offensive line can pass block and run block effectively, these skill position players are the best in the country. Now, yes, Michigan does have a better, I think Corum and Edwards are the best back in the room in the country.
It's not a question. It's clear.
Henderson and Williams are studs. And especially Henderson, I honestly thought last year that him and Corum were like 1 and 2. And it could have been interchangeable. That he got hurt and he had a bad year. He just wasn't very good, but he was hurt all year.
So very recently, like within the last week, there was a report came out where there's possibly some tension between Ryan Day and Henderson. At least maybe at one point there was, not now, but Henderson has publicly said he's not a fan of the way his injury was handled. And there is kind of a lot of proof over the first 2 years that the moment there's even any sign of something, like Ryan Day is like, nope, take Henderson out. Like if Ryan Day doesn't believe he's 100%, he won't let Henderson play on the field. Like his freshman year, he'd have so many games where he would have like 10 to 12 carries for like 150, 160 yards. And then he would never play a snap in the second half. Like he's only ever had like 1 or 2 games where Ryan Day was like, let's keep giving him the ball. Like against Michigan 2021, they abandoned him so quickly when he had like 60 yards in the first quarter or something like that. And he's done that consistently since he's been there. Is he'll very quickly abandon Henderson. And like the whole last season, I'm just wondering, like, where's the screenplays to Henderson? Where's the little pop outs to, like, we know like he can make big runs. Like I think he is actually the most important player because we're breaking in a new quarterback who, which I think the quarterback will be fine. I mean, will we get another first round QB? We'll see. But I mean, I fully believe we'll get another NFL QB out of whoever else is next starting. Someone that's drafted one day. But yeah, I think Henderson is the key. I think he is such a big deal because you can have Ibuka and Harrison and Stroud. And we've seen in back-to-back games with Michigan and Georgia, that's not enough. It's not enough. And so I think Ryan Day has to let Henderson be number one. Mayan Williams deserves carries and deserves times, but like it can't be 1A and 1B. It's got to be Henderson is 1, Williams is 2. There's got to be a commitment. Henderson is an incredible athlete and a very good running back. At some point, you got to commit to your best players at their positions. You got to.
All right. Well, I think that'll about do us today. We're approaching 2 hours, which are just a bit over our target. So
we were way too good on the schedule the first time. You knew this was bound to happen.
We'll work on that for next time. But for Cody and I, we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Football Frenemies. Take care.